Hello, welcome to the Health, Wealth and Performance Podcast. I am the host, John Cartwright, and we are in the new digs in the new studio. And I thought today it might be a good chance for me to actually share a little bit of sort of my journey and how the heck I've managed to get here. Because the main reason really that things have turned around was me sort of going down this wealth pathway and reaching out to a mentor who really turned my world around and he turned my wealth around. And today that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how this $300 million mentor managed to turn my wealth around. And a lot of the time, it's not really what you think. It's not get rich quick. He didn't really even tell me what to do. He just kind of set up the territory for me so I understood really how wealth works and how money works. And with that in place, it managed to turn everything around. So, I think what we'll talk about today is really that the foundations and the fundamental principles that he went over with me that really are the thing that's made the biggest difference, and taken us from a huge amount of debt to now being, I won't say financially free yet, because that just is different for everybody. And I'm not financially free, but in a lot of people's terms, they might consider us to be financially free. And it really goes back to sort of where this whole journey began for me was 3 years ago. I got fairly sick and I was getting a bunch of tests done and they were testing me for some pretty, heavy illnesses. And I remember sitting in the doctor's and I was sort of waiting to hear these results. I just thought, shoot, man, if I'm in trouble here, my family's not really set up. I sort of was going over in my mind, like, how much we got, how much debt have we got? Yeah, is my wife going to be okay? And the two kids, and it's that scary thought. And I'm a bit of a drama queen at the best of times. So obviously I was going to sort of catastrophizing the whole thing. But I sort of made a decision in that time. I was like, I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to turn wealth around. I've never really cared about it. And now I care about it. There's no point in, I don't ever want to have this feeling again of just total scarcity and helplessness. And so this mentor I can't even explain how it happened, because it was kind of almost like I was looking, if you like, but really sort of appeared out of nowhere. And those cliches that they talk about when the student is ready, that the mentor appears, I always thought that was a bit just cheesy. But man, it happened. It really did happen to me. So I'm, a converted believer now. And the first thing that really blew my mind is what we want to talk about today. And it's so simple. Like, some of you may be like, was that profound for you? And for me, it totally was. And then once I knew that, then there's really some basics that we'll talk about later, that it's like, if you put that into place, there's the ability for, if you like, to get lucky. And that's exactly what's happened to me. Is, what do they say, that luck is really just comes when someone's prepared. And I prepared and the luck showed up. So in our first conversation, we kind of went deep pretty quickly, because my personality, I don't tend to muck around too much. I want to get into the weeds really quickly. And so he kind of just said to me, you've been working for a long time, you got a half decent job, you're running your own sort of business. How come you're not wealthy? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I just kind of don't earn enough money. I was like, I've made some moves here. I've bought a house. I've got an investment property, sort of thinking over time that'll eventually happen, that I'll pay it off and then I'll kind of retire and I'll have enough money in retirement. I've sort of figured it out that if I stay on this track, I should have a couple of mil by the time I retire. And that's enough. I don't really care. But I'm starting to kind of smell a rat with that a little bit. And he said, good, good that you're starting to smell a rat, because I can tell you everything I need to know about you, because you've told me about how you behave. And so if I can see how you behave, I can tell you exactly what your outcomes are going to be. And he said, you are doing what you've been taught to do. And you would have been taught it in school. You've been taught it. Everything in the world has taught you to do what you're doing right now. So you're kind of doing your job. And to an extent, it's kind of like that. It's not your fault, kid. I sort of felt like that Good Will Hunting scene. It's not your fault, kid. He just said, you're just doing what you've been taught to do. And so he said, you have been taught to earn, spend, and borrow. I kind of thought to myself for a second, and he started showing me from a job perspective how I look at the world. And that first thing is that I've kind of got to earn my money. It's sort of like your time and labor is what you exchange for sort of this, monetary system that we've developed. But I have to earn it. I've got to give up my time and labor. And that is what gets ingrained to you really early on. It's what sort of everyone talks about. I had these stories running about wealthy people that I didn't really realize. It's like, they must have ripped somebody off. They're like, rich people are assholes. Remember that joke I got told as a kid? It's like, what's the difference between a hedgehog and a Range Rover? On a hedgehog, the pricks are on the outside, and just things like that. I was like, I'd laugh at that sort of thing about, yeah, man, rich people are pricks. But just that, it's like, yeah, me, I'm better. I'm morally better because I earn my money. And that's really what gets ingrained into you. At school, you get taught, hey, what's the best job you could possibly go for? Now, when I was in school, I got told, hey, you're probably not smart enough to be a physio, because I said, I want to be a physiotherapist or an architect. And I remember my careers advisor saying, you're not smart enough. You don't have the good grades for that. And I remember starting out in sports science, and then I kind of got to the end of my first year. I was horribly depressed. And, I think I probably shared before, I got to a pretty dark place. I just made the decision, man, I'm going to go for it. And I managed to get into physio school. And all of a sudden, this sort of mental thing of what I thought was possible was like, hey, man, I'm going up a tier in terms of what I can earn, and I'm going to be fine. Until I wasn't. And that's where I got to hit that threshold point where I was like, man, I think I might have been sold something here. So you're taught to earn your money, and you have to earn it to be sort of worthy of having money. And the thing is that the second kind of part of that he taught me was, what you're sort of sold is that if you can find a job that is sort of fulfilling and really is useful for society, then you'll be rewarded based on like kind of how useful you are for society. And what you're sold is that will be rewarding enough for you to kind of go, hey, that's, it's really worthwhile. That's why I'm going to pursue this job or this career. And if I work hard enough, then eventually I'm going to retire and, get to chill out and do the things that I want to do. But what actually happens is you get that paycheck and you kind of look at it, you're like, oh, awesome. If work feels good, like it feels rewarding, but I don't really have that much to show for my labor. And so what ends up happening is you get taught to pursue and desire things, so you will spend that money. So the second part of that is you get taught to earn, then you get taught to spend. You really get taught to spend and to feel good when you're spending it. How many people say, hey, you really earned that, man. Like you earned it. You should treat yourself. You deserve it. You work bloody hard. So you should go out and enjoy yourself. Why shouldn't you? Or, I hear this sometimes too. I want to have the lifestyle that I want to lead. And so that's why I kind of spend that money, because the spending the money gives me the lifestyle that I want. And you've been taught to do that. Then the third part is kind of almost like the worst part about all of this, is that you've been taught to earn your money. Then you've been taught to spend it. And then usually that's kind of, you don't have enough. The way things are set up, we're all kind of in a bit of scarcity. Everyone's, in particular, if you've kind of got you don't even have to have your finger on the pulse to know that some stuff is going down at the moment. Everyone's starting to struggle more and more. That's just a cycle that's actually by design, but we probably won't get into that today. But what starts to happen is you then go, okay, you can actually borrow money or get a line of credit for your future time and labor that you're yet to give. So that comes in the form of debt and credit. And so that's almost the worst part, because now you're getting the rewards for the time and labor that you're yet to do. And then when you end up spending that, you get behind on everything. And then this whole debt cycle continues where essentially you don't get out of debt. And that debt cycle is built into that system. And so when he said that to me, I'm like, oh man, that's totally what I'm doing. And I wouldn't even consider myself someone who goes out and spends large. Most of my friends call me a tight ass, which is fair enough. But that earning the right to have money, and then that spending the money, kind of feeling like, oh man, it feels great when I get to buy something new. And then the borrowing, like at that point, I was between my house and our investment property. I think we had something like $730,000 in debt. And that was like, oh, that's normal. Some of my friends had $1 million debt, and that's just become normal. And so that's essentially what my mentor said. I can just watch you, and that's what you behave. But then he said to me, what do you value? And I was like, well, I value freedom, and I value family, and I value health. Those are probably my top 3. And he's like, okay, so are you behaving freedom? And I was like, well, sort of. In my mind, I'm like, stuff the system a little bit. And I think I'm free in the way I think. And he's like, yeah, but how are you behaving? I'm like, yeah, I'm not behaving freedom. He said, what we call that is a dissonance. There's a dissonance between what you actually value and what you're actually behaving. He said, I've looked into this fairly deeply, and I can't see a situation where you can actually be free within what has been created in our world without wealth. So you don't even have wealth in your top 3 values. How would I expect to see it in your life? How are you even going to behave it if it's not even on your radar of what you value? And that right there was the biggest thing for me, where I was like, I was in denial that wealth was way down. It's like, it's not important, because I sort of felt like it was something that I couldn't reach. And talking to friends and family since, you can start to hear most people talk like that, except when you're around wealthy people. They don't talk like that. And as part of my job, at one point I'd worked in really kind of high socioeconomic areas in terms of like a lot of the clientele, like my patients that I had. Some of my clients were sort of $150 million plus and $400 million plus. I treated a billionaire at one point. These individuals, I could hear their language was different to mine, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But that earn, spend, and borrow conversation is exactly the difference between me and them. They didn't talk like that. They didn't think like that. So once I kind of got to see the impact of that world, my mentor then switched it and said, this is what rich people do. This is what wealthy people do. They don't earn their money. They accumulate money. They are just looking to provide value any place that they can in exchange for currency. So that value that they're providing is what the exchange is that happens. And this perception that they've got to rip somebody off or they're assholes, there's some people doing that, but that's not how they're looking at the world. It's how can I accumulate money? Then once they have some money, they're not just going and spending it. Everyone's perception is that like all these rich people, like you see like famous people, and I'll use the Kardashians as an example, right? They're so good at getting people to buy things that they can't afford and don't even need. And the perception is that they are spending a heap of money. And most wealthy people aren't spending a cent. Well, I shouldn't say not spending a cent. A lot of things are given to them. They're gifted them. I'll never forget hearing the story of Michael Jordan where he said, like most of the time now, I can't even spend money. I go into restaurants and the people say, oh, no, we don't want your money. Your money's no good here. And he's like, this is so crazy. I actually have money now and people won't take it. everyone's perception is that they spend money, and they don't. The second thing that they do is once they've accumulated money, they protect some wealth. And that protection of wealth is protecting against inflation. So that's the loss of the value of the currency. And they basically protect it by investing in things that are a hedge against inflation. Now, all of that's like, some of you might just be like, that's second language. To me, I kind of understood those words, but not really. But basically, what it boils down to is there's a couple of things that they can invest in to protect their wealth. And this isn't financial advice, but if you look into it, if you look back over thousands of years, a lot of the time that protection has been somewhere around gold and silver. Like right now, if you want to go into that world, you can have a look at what banks are currently doing. And in particular, reserve banks, what are they buying? What are countries buying? You've got people at war right now. What are they buying? They are buying gold and silver. That's usually a bit of a cycle and a sign that something's coming. People are going, where do I put my money right now? Let me protect it. So once they've accumulated money, now they're going to protect some. The third piece to that puzzle is they're going to now multiply. So instead of borrowing money, they are learning to multiply it. If there's any debt involved in sort of these, rich or wealthy people's lives, it's only to leverage it so that they can multiply the value of the money that they already have. Now, typically when you're looking to multiply that money, the multiplying of that money is done through sort of investment vehicles. You're not actually taking control of that multiplying. Markets are taking care of that. Now, you can control the multiplying to an extent from if you own a business and you manage to get the business to grow. But generally, you want to think of that multiplying as done by markets. So wealthy people and the rich, they accumulate, then they protect and multiply the value of the money that they already have. When they behave that, just how much people they have just really comes down to what are they invested in, what's the timing of their investment, and then how long were they in investments for. That usually determines a lot of people's wealth, not what you're told. You get told it's like, this person just knows something that I don't, and they got rich quick, and they've done a dirty deal, or someone helped them, or they inherited all their money. The amount of wealthy people that inherited their money is tiny. It's tiny. So that was my first big lesson. My mentor said to me, you behave earning, spending, and borrowing. And if you want to turn your wealth around, this is what you need to learn to behave, which is to accumulate money, protect some money, and multiply the value of the money that you already have. Now, on my own journey, I was like, right, what am I going to need to do here? Now, to make changes in your life, I'd been studying this for a little while, and I thought, man, I need to do something big here. And I did something pretty drastic. And most people around me thought I was mad, but they didn't realize I kind of had a plan. And I had a mentor who wasn't telling me what to do, but was certainly guiding me. And I needed to change my environment. One of the biggest ways that you can make change in your life is to get out of familiar environments. When you're in familiar conversations and you're around people that you know and they know you and you know them, it can be quite hard to change. And that change happens over a slow, long period of time, and it's easy to kind of get back into old habits, I remember at one point in my life, I was sort of trying to give away drinking when I was younger, and all of a sudden, kind of all my friends sort of phased out because they were all big drinkers and they didn't know how to relate to me. And then when I came back on the scene, I was trying to just take it a bit more easy with my drinking, and in that environment, I just went from, not drinking to straight back into it. And so I sort of looked into, for my personal journey, I'm not telling other people to do this, I looked at this debt thing. I was like, okay, if I'm going to shake this up, I'm going to really shake it up. So we sold up everything. And within this, obviously your kind of partner needs to be on board with that. But the funny thing was, as I started sharing this information, my wife just took it and ran with it. And she was, if anything, the one champing at the bit to do this more than anything, because her dream was to one day travel around Australia in a caravan And she wanted to do it with our young family. And in particular, she wanted to do the west coast of Australia. So that's what we did. We sold up the house and sold the investment property. And I started studying my butt off in terms of what was happening in overall patterns and what happens in markets and what happens in investing. And I started investing. I reinvested some of the money. By the time we sold the investment property and the house, we had some capital. And I won't say, it was somewhere in the vicinity of about 300,000. So not bad, but basically for 20 years of working for my wife and I, it was like, yeah, that's all we got. So when you do something like this, essentially you come up against sort of, I didn't realize how much you come up against some resistance. So friends and family started reaching out to my wife and myself, going like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. And I couldn't explain what was happening. I'd sort of try and get into it with them and they just didn't want to hear it. They're like, hey, mortgage is the safest thing you can do. And, debt, you're in good debt. And all of this kind of language. I was like, wow, I can hear what you're saying now. So we traveled around Australia for the last 2 years in a caravan with our 2 young kids. And most people probably think that we've spent most of our money. But what I looked at, it was, can I multiply the value of the dollars that I already have? And that's what happened. I basically invested in something that I was like, right, this is looking like the timing is pretty good. I can't control the market, but in terms of cycles and things, there's not a lot that is near the bottom and is yet to rise, which was the basic sort of education that I got. Buy at the bottom, sell at the top if you're going to sell. So as we were traveling around Australia, this is where my world started to shift. I started to behave wealth. And it's funny what shows up when you start to behave it. I started to behave freedom. I was free on the road with this family of mine, and it wasn't without its struggles, but I was living it. And during those 2 years, I won't even say I made it. Our wealth multiplied by more money than I've ever made in my life. And I was working the least amount that I've ever worked in my life. And that was the best lesson. That could have taken a lot longer. And to an extent, as I said, I kind of had some prepared luck that happened. But there's this, like I said earlier, there's kind of the next sort of part of that lesson was that when you're learning to multiply wealth, there's 2 things that can happen. One is you can kind of take care of looking at the markets. And when the markets, you cannot control what's happening in the markets. All you can control is how long you're in for, and then also trying to time when you get into the markets. But the markets do the heavy lifting. But it's also where you can exponentially get wealthy. Then the other side of that is cash flow. Can you learn how to bring in cash flow? And my mentor said to me, if you can learn how to get cash flow in any market, and then if you can also then know how to multiply the value of the money that you're bringing in the markets, then the whole world can fall down and you can still make money. That is when you are actually free. And so for yourself, if you can look at that, if you can start to see what you value and then what you're actually behaving, are you earning, spending, and borrowing, or are you accumulating, protecting, and multiplying? Now, for some of you, this may just be an easy conversation that you've known for years. For me, it's still the foundations that set everything up for me. Then once you're behaving, the accumulating, protecting, and multiplying, it's getting better and better, really, at can I learn how to get cash flow that's in my control? I can learn how to bring in cash flow. And then also the other side of it, can I learn in markets and how to learn cycles better? And that's exactly the journey that I'm on. And I'm only, essentially 3 years into that journey. And the turnaround for me has been massive. So I better wrap things up. I hope you got a lot out of today. I'm by no means an expert, but I'm certainly on my way. And so hopefully you can kind of walk alongside me as I'm starting to go on my journey here. But if you've got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. But until next time, it's bye from me.